So we are in the studio right now with two incredible authors that I cannot wait to introduce you to the audience. You are Gary Van Riper, Justin Van Riper, and you are the authors of the ever-loving series, The Adirondack Kids. And I don't want to forget Carol, your wife. She's not here, but she's the illustrator, and we'll get into all of that good stuff. But first of all, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm excited to dig in because these books are so iconic, especially to the folks that live here in the region, but throughout the world, essentially.
Right.
So let's dig in a little bit. And what I want folks to understand and know is how this adventure began and how these books began. And Justin, that story starts with you.
Yeah. So growing up, we got to go way back. Growing up when I was 4 or 5 years old, we started working on stories together for fun. We would take printer paper, staple them together, and draw stories, make pictures, and just come up with ideas. And we often take these stories that we did to different school events and show kids, like, this is the first book we ever did together. So we love telling that story, but we've been writing together really my entire life, starting even as young as 4 or 5 years old. But the first Adirondack Kids book idea came to us when I was about 9, 10 years old. We had been speaking at a parents', or my dad was invited to speak at a parents' reading partners event, and we had been writing a story together for fun at home anyway about our camp, because we love the Adirondacks, we love our camp, and we liked spending time together already doing the writing. And people came up to us after that event and asked when our book was coming out. So we thought, okay, I guess let's think about maybe doing a whole book here instead of just our little chapter. So that's really how it began, and from there we expanded the story, changed it a lot, and several months later printed our first couple of copies. So.
And Gary, you're no stranger to writing. You're an award-winning journalist. Talk to me about that.
Well, started a community newspaper, and we just, a little team, and we were able to be nimble because the technology, it had come around where you could do a lot of things that even larger papers had a harder time doing. So yeah, and I thought, when you had a community newspaper, this is going to be great because I love to write. Well, then we found out writing's like a little sliver when you have a community newspaper. There's so many things you have to do. But yeah, the writing, several stories won awards, Syracuse Press Club awards, and we had a political cartoonist, and he won an award. I mean, there's a number of things for our little newspaper, but it was about a 7-year run. And actually, we started the book series in the middle of that. It was toward the end of that run of the newspaper. So we ended up closing the newspaper. I took a full-time job as a pastor, and the books continued to go on.
So I want to just back up a second before we dive into that piece. What was it like writing with your child, seeing these illustrations? And I know, again, we said Carol, your wife, started illustrating in book 4. What is that like when your little guy is just like, look at this, let's make this bigger and better? You as a writer.
Well, here's what happened. As Justin was getting older, I came across a book about how to raise a reader for life. And I found out that there were several danger times when young people drop out of reading. And one of them was 4th grade, and the other's 9th grade. And boys tend to drop out of reading before girls do for pleasure. I didn't want him to drop out. So that's why I decided, I've read to him every day of his life. When he got a little bit older, he might stay overnight at a friend's house, but pretty much I read to him every day of his life, even from an infant, with little board books and the plastic books, that they chew on and they drool on when they're little, right through. And then when he got older, we would proofread. Some of our reading time was what we had been writing. But with him entering 3rd grade, I thought, maybe we can ratchet this up. Read to him every day. How about writing for real stories? And I didn't even know if I could write fiction because I was so nonfiction oriented. But so that's when I got serious about it. So yeah, then Justin kind of filled in there how we started writing the first book together. We weren't planning on a series. Wasn't even thinking about publishing it, until this person came up and said, well, when's that book coming out? So, and then that first book, we had about 2,000 copies printed. I coached basketball at our high school, And I took my coaching money and we invested it in 2,000 copies of #1, not knowing if anybody would even buy one.
And they did.
Well, what we knew was my wife's family has like 5 siblings. So we said, there's 5 copies. And then there's grandparents, you know. But those copies were gone in the first couple of months, even before the season for the Adirondacks, which is kind of like, you know, 4th of July to Labor Day. Before that even happened. And so we ordered a reprint and then said, well, let's try #2. And then we've been doing that 1 book a year for about 20 years now.
And you self-published?
Yeah, totally self-published.
Still today?
Yeah, yeah. Justin, even when he was young, he said, Dad, maybe we should.
Yeah, well, we started looking at publishers and folks that were behind on their contracts. It would have been years anyway before they could have published our books. And I didn't want to lose. The one thing I knew, I didn't know a lot about publishing as a little kid, but the one thing I knew is that I didn't want to lose control over everything that we have with our stories. We wanted our stories to be the way we wanted them, the pictures we wanted, the characters we wanted. We wanted control over everything, and I didn't want to give that up.
His instincts were good.
Yeah, even as a kid. So he said, okay, and so we tried the self-publishing route, and we're very glad that we did. I mean, we were invited to be a keynote speaker at several different events, and they were talking about publishing. There was publishers there saying, like, we can't offer you anything that you're not already doing for yourselves at this point.
What a great message to folks that are
Yeah.
considering this, and I really appreciate that share.
Yep.
Can we dig in a little bit about what your mission is with this? And we were talking before the cameras came on. It's not just writing and illustrating and working with your wife. This is more than a family affair. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so, well, reading, of course, is important, right? And we knew that we wanted to write stories that we enjoyed, right? I grew up with the Hardy Boys, you know, chapter books, things like that, adventure, that sort of thing. And so we wanted to write wholesome stories that parents and grandparents weren't like afraid if it was a read aloud, let's say, oh, what's going to happen if I turn the page, you know, that they're safe, you know, in that respect. Wholesome, adventure, you know, but we also wanted an educational aspect about it so that each one of these stories revolves around an important person, place, or thing in the Adirondacks. So there was that aspect. So reading, right? When we speak in schools, you know, we emphasize that. You know, read, read, read. You want to be a writer someday, you must be a reader. That sort of thing. But the other thing is, so many children now, these last few years with, you know,
Phones,
phones
technology.
and technology and all this stuff, and it's like, when, of course, when I was a kid, we played outside all the time. So that's another part kind of our mission, is to try to get kids to set down their electronic devices and maybe inspired through the stories, get outside and realize what's out there, the wonder, you know, of nature, and in this case, the Adirondacks, could be anywhere, but get outside, you know, put down those electronic devices. So yeah, that's kind of our twofold mission. Read, read, read. Don't drop out of reading for pleasure. And get outside, put those electronic devices down and get outside and make your own adventures, have your own adventures, find out what's out there.
I'm an adult and I really appreciate this message. So in 22 years, you've authored 21 books. You've got some puzzles. We've got one up here. I want to talk a little bit about your 20th anniversary edition, because I understand that's basically a rewrite, a reprint of the first.
Yep.
And the 20th book that came out, The Amazing Migration Vacation. So talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in 20 plus years, technology and things change. Growing up, you know, not a lot of kids even 20 years ago were necessarily using film cameras and things like that. Things were already changing. And so we had written about, for example, a 35 millimeter camera in the first book. And I had used one when we would go out on adventures. I remember we went kayaking one morning at Moss Lake, and I took the shot of a loon that my dad had been trying to get for 25 years. And,
Seriously.
and I was 11 years old.
I wanted one vocalizing. I wanted a loon vocalizing, you know, and he asked if he could, and my camera, it was manual, it wasn't automatic, it's got a long lens on it. Dad, can I use your camera? And
He was
boom,
nervous, naturally. But
loon comes up, opens its mouth, and bang, it gets it.
But because technology and things have changed over the last couple of decades, we wanted to add a little bit to the back of the story explaining explaining some of that stuff. You know, what is a manual film camera? But because the characters have been, people have fallen in love with the characters and things like that, we wanted to do some expanded information, you know, bio pages on the characters and all these other things. So we really updated the book in terms of any mistakes that might have been still in there from many years ago. But we expanded it. We did some special content for the book, and then did a special cover, and then released it.
Yeah.
We've been
Yeah.
very
You
happy
one
with
of
it.
the characters? Because there's a Justin in there. Is that you?
Yeah, so when we first started writing, I thought it'd be cool, hey, if we're ever famous one day, it'd be cool to be in a story. And so Justin Robert, my middle name is Robert, and so he was kind of based on, a bit on me. We had some differences, but we both loved the Adirondacks. We loved the outdoors. We loved animals. We loved Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, you know. And so he was an easy character to create, and it felt like I got to be part of the story without necessarily actually being part of the story. So it was fun.
Where did Dax come from? And tell us who Dax is.
So yeah,
You could do it tell it like when we visit a school.
right. So a lot of stories have animal sidekicks, you know, especially kids' stories. But there wasn't a lot with like cats, and we had a cat at the time. And I thought, let's do a cat. Why not? And so the cat we had at the time, though, was not particularly friendly. And so we thought, we want a cat that's going to be interesting and unique. Calico cats are really fun, lots of different colors, very interesting to look at, supposedly very adventurous type cats. So we actually went to a humane society in Rome, New York, and we looked at all the different cats there to try to find a calico cat, short-haired calico cat that fit the bill. It wasn't looking good, so we were getting ready to leave, and on the way out we saw a cage that we had missed with some kittens. There was a calico cat in there, so we thought, oh great. So we always get the kids involved. You know, we start telling this real dramatic story about how we're looking at the cats, and we get really close, and we get down on one knee, and all the kittens are like getting close to the front of the cage, and we put our hands up, and they all jump to the back of the cage, and except for, very conveniently for us, the calico cat who came to the front was like licking our fingers and like trying to get to us. So we got her, brought her home. Her name was Chickadee, and we renamed her Dax. We always ask the kids, you know, what do you think Dax is short for? They always say Daxter or some other thing, but we thought it'd be short for Adirondacks. So we renamed her Dax, brought her home. She was with us for almost 18 years.
I love how the universe works and put that cat right
Yeah.
in front of you.
It was amazing.
As we wrap things up, tell me a little bit about your roots in the Adirondacks. Obviously, you're experts, and you've created this beautiful world based on people, places, and things there. And then tell me what's next, because you have a little boy named Levi, and he's 6, and I want to know about him and what he thinks of these books.
Yeah, so my wife, Justin's mom, is part of a family that has had a camp in the Adirondacks on the North Shore of Fourth Lake for 118 years. So they actually brought, I guess, materials up the Fulton chain of lakes for the first camp. And so that's how we really got connected. A lot of the background and the epicenter of the books is right there in Eagle Bay and Inlet. Because of that, that's where the kids hail from. So that's kind of our strongest connection with the Adirondacks. I'm not a dock person. You know, everybody kind of spends their time on the dock, but it's my headquarters kind of to go out and hike, and I've hiked a lot in the high peaks and other places and stuff, but that's kind of our strongest connection with the Adirondacks.
And how do we keep this going, this father-son family writing adventure?
Yeah, well, we always tell people, as long as they keep reading and buying our stories, we'll keep writing them. The big thing for us is we like to hear from kids or from parents who've had reluctant readers, who have been like, you know, our son hated reading, and then he picked up your books, and now he won't stop.
That's what's been amazing, is the letters.
Yeah, that's been really, really neat to see. And so that's been one of the biggest inspirations for continuing, the way that it's impacted other people. Now, because it's been so long, I have friends who grew up reading the books. We're having kids who are now reading the books, which is wild, feels wild. But so that's been really, really cool to see. And yeah, I mean, as long as there's a market for it and we continue to have ideas, we'll probably keep writing. My son is, like you said, he's 6. He loves reading. He loves we do the same thing. We read every single night before bed. Haven't missed a night since he's been born. So he loves stories. He loves reading stories, telling stories. If we don't have a book and we're somewhere, we make up stories, and he loves it. So he's he's not quite to the reading age of chapter books yet.
He's
so we
3
haven't
years
really-
away
we
from
haven't-
when I started with him, so
So we haven't quite jumped into these stories yet, but for him, kind of like me growing up, it didn't seem special. It was just normal life, and so for him, it's just kind of, this is just life. It's just the way that things are. So
Well, this has been a fun adventure for all of us in here, I think, learning about it. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Gary. Thank you for the books. And folks, we can find these at many local bookstores throughout the Adirondacks and beyond. Really appreciate your time, and I look forward to the next book.
thank you for having us.
thank you.